"You're fired," she said with a smirk. "Good luck finding another job with that attitude." I stood frozen, my heart thudding so loud I could barely hear the rest of her sentence. After 3 years of begging for a raise, picking up extra shifts, training new hires without extra pay, and swallowing every rude comment she threw at me, I was fired just because she found out I was job hunting on my lunch break. That was the reason. No warning. No meeting. Just a printed termination letter waiting for me at my desk. She thought I'd beg. She thought I'd cry. She thought I had nowhere else to go. But what she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this day. And what came next would leave her speechless. Let's rewind for a second. My name's Jake. I'm 29, and until last week, I worked as a floor supervisor at a regional shipping company in Oregon. The company wasn't flashy. Just a mid-size warehouse operation where boxes went out faster than people's birthdays came in. I joined at 26, straight out of a tough spot. I just lost my dad, had student loans, and needed steady pay. The job offered $20 an hour back then, with a promise of performance-based raises every year. Only, those raises never came. The first year, I chalked it up to the company adjusting after some system overhaul. "You've done a great job, Jake, but we need to tighten up expenses right now," my boss, her name's Trina, told me. I believed her. The second year, I had already stepped up. I trained 3 new employees, stayed overtime for a week straight during a holiday crunch, and even filled in for a manager who went on paternity leave. But when raise time came, nothing. Trina gave me a shiny Employee of the Quarter plaque and a handshake. No bonus. No raise. Not even a gas card. "You're a rock star, Jake," she said with a fake smile. "Hang in there, your time's coming." I hung in there. By year 3, it started to hit me. This wasn't about company finances. It was about control. Trina liked me where I was, dependable, hardworking, and underpaid. She liked having someone she could count on, but never reward. That's when I started updating my resume. I didn't make a big deal out of it. Just quiet tweaks here and there on my phone during breaks. I reached out to a few contacts I met over the years. I knew my worth. I just needed someone else to see it too. Then came the day everything snapped. It was a rainy Tuesday. I was sitting in the break room, sipping cold coffee, scrolling through an email from a potential employer. Trina walked in, snatched the phone from my hand, and read it out loud in front of 2 co-workers. "We'd love to interview you for a warehouse management role." Wow, isn't that cute? I was stunned. "This is what you do on company time now," she said, arms crossed. "Maybe I should save you the trouble and let you go now." I tried to explain it was my lunch break, and that I'd been more than patient these past 3 years. But she wouldn't hear it. She stormed out. 20 minutes later, I came back to my desk to find a white envelope sitting on top of my keyboard. Termination letter. Effective immediately. No severance. No references. Nothing. I went home that night furious. Not just because I was jobless, but because of the way she made me feel so small, like everything I did didn't matter. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, that night, something happened that changed everything for me, and for her. That night, after I got fired, I sat in my apartment just staring at the wall. I'd never felt so humiliated. I wasn't even angry at first. I just kept thinking about how easily Trina threw me away, like I was a piece of garbage that had outlived its use. But then, my phone buzzed. It was an email. The same one I'd been reading when Trina snatched my phone. The company was called North Bend Logistics, and they wanted to schedule an interview. I clicked reply so fast my fingers shook. I told them I was available any time, any day. They responded within an hour. "Can you do a video interview tomorrow morning?" I barely slept that night, going over every question I thought they might ask. I even ironed my only nice shirt and cleaned the corner of my room to make it look like I had an office set up. The interview lasted 25 minutes. The guy who interviewed me, Mark, seemed impressed by my experience. You ran the floor operations and trained new hires? He asked. Yes, and I also handled performance logs and scheduling. He nodded, scribbled something down, and smiled. By the next morning, I had a job offer. It paid $84,000 a year, came with full benefits, 401k match, and something I hadn't heard in 3 years, respect. But that wasn't even the best part. North Bend Logistics wasn't just offering me a job, they were opening a new distribution hub just 10 miles from my old warehouse. And they were hiring fast. I asked, carefully, are you still looking for team leads and floor supervisors? We are, Mark said. Why? Got someone in mind? I did. I had plenty of people in mind. See, I wasn't the only one Trina had treated poorly. There were at least 4 other workers at my old warehouse. People like Manny, who worked double shifts to support his kids, or Alice, who stayed quiet even when Trina made her clean the break room like a janitor. These people were gold, and Trina treated them like dirt. I called each one of them that weekend. Hey, it's Jake. I got a new job, and they're hiring. You in? Manny didn't even hesitate. Bro, yes. I'm so done with that place. By Monday, 4 of us had joined the new company. I started my position as operations manager. Manny and Alice were brought in as team leads. And suddenly, Trina was down 3 of her best workers in 72 hours. But I wasn't done yet. Because one of the last things I found while clearing my desk was a USB drive I had forgotten about. It had copies of every incident report I ever filed. Every complaint ignored. Every time I flagged an issue, like when Trina violated safety procedures just to save time on shipping, and no one followed up. I had records. I didn't plan to use them at first. But then, one of my former co-workers sent me a text. Trina's telling everyone you were stealing company time and threatening her. She's saying that's why you got fired. That's when the anger returned. Not just anger, but a purpose. If she was going to lie about me, try to ruin my reputation in this small logistics community, then I was going to show everyone exactly who Trina was. And it started with one email. I typed it slowly, carefully, and attached all the reports. Then I hit send. To corporate HR. And to OSHA. I closed my laptop, heart pounding. I didn't know what was going to happen next. Maybe nothing. But 3 weeks later, I got a phone call that made my jaw drop. Subscribe before taking this story to next level. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. The words that just came out of my stepdad's mouth felt like a punch in the stomach. I sold your mountain cabin to settle my gambling debts, he said. Then, he laughed. Actually laughed, like it was some funny joke he expected me to laugh along with. But it wasn't a joke. I stood there frozen, hearing the words over and over again in my head. That cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was the last thing I had from my mom before she passed away. And now, he was telling me it was gone, just like that. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I swallowed hard, refusing to let them fall. What do you mean, you sold it? I managed to say, my voice shaking. Oh, come on, Logan. It's just a cabin. You don't even go there anymore, he said, chuckling. Anyway, it's done. I needed the money. I could feel the rage building up inside me. But before I could respond, he added something that made my blood run cold. Besides, you wouldn't have been able to keep it up forever. I did you a favor, kid. He hung up before I could say another word. I stood there, staring at the black screen of my phone, the anger and sadness boiling together until I thought I might explode. But I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone across the room like I wanted to. Instead, I took a deep breath, wiped the tear that had finally escaped, and sat down on the couch. I had to figure out what just happened. I had to find out if it was even legal for him to sell it. I had to find out if there was any way I could get my cabin back. And that's when I remembered something my mom once told me about the cabin, a secret she made me promise not to forget. But before I could dig into it, my phone buzzed again, and this time, it wasn't my stepdad calling. It was someone else. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who could change everything. Before all this mess started, life was actually okay. I had a simple but peaceful life in a small town outside of Denver. I worked as a mechanic, fixing up cars for neighbors and friends. I wasn't rich, but I made enough to live comfortably. On weekends, I sometimes drove up to the mountains to visit my mom's old cabin, the one she had left to me in her will. It was a small, cozy place surrounded by tall pines, with a view of the valley that could steal your breath away. Mom and I had spent many summers there, fishing, hiking, and sitting by the fire. After she passed, the cabin became even more special. It was the one place I still felt close to her. I didn't go up as much after work got busy, but knowing it was there gave me comfort. I thought about selling it once, when money got tight, but every time I sat down with the papers, I remembered Mom's voice telling me, "Promise me, Logan. Keep the cabin. No matter what happens." So I kept it, like a stubborn kid hanging onto his favorite toy. When my mom remarried, I wasn't thrilled about it. Rick, my stepdad, was loud, rude, and always seemed to have some get-rich-quick scheme he was chasing. But Mom loved him, so I tried to get along with him. After she passed away, I kept my distance. Rick was never truly family to me. We barely spoke after the funeral, and honestly, I preferred it that way. That's why today's phone call hit me like a lightning bolt. I racked my brain, thinking back to how the ownership of the cabin worked. I was sure it was in my name. Mom had made sure of that. She wanted me to have something that was truly mine, something no one could take away. But if that was true, how could Rick have sold it? That's when I remembered the envelope. The one Mom gave me a month before she died. She told me to open it only if I ever needed proof that the cabin was mine. I had tucked it away in a safe in my closet, never thinking I'd need it. I ran to the closet and pulled out the safe, fumbling with the lock until it finally clicked open. Inside, under some old photo albums and letters, was the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a deed. And on that deed, clear as day, was my name, and only my name. My heart raced as I realized something. Rick had no legal right to sell the cabin. None at all. But before I could celebrate, my phone buzzed again. Another call. It was the number of the man Rick claimed he sold the cabin to. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. Should I answer? What if he already moved in? What if he refused to give it back? What if it was already too late? Taking a deep breath, I answered the call. "Hello," I said. There was a long pause, then a gruff voice spoke. "Logan, we need to talk about the cabin." My heart dropped. And that's when everything got even worse. "We need to talk about the cabin," the man on the phone repeated. My mind raced. Was he calling to gloat? Was he calling to warn me to stay away? I gripped the phone tighter, trying to steady my voice. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice sounding much braver than I felt. There was a grunt, and then he said, "Name's Darren. I bought the cabin. Your stepdad sold it to me 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks. I felt dizzy. 2 weeks, and I hadn't even known? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to stay calm. "I don't think you understand," I said slowly. "That cabin wasn't his to sell. It was mine. It's still mine." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Darren breathing heavily, like he was debating whether to hang up or not. Finally, he said, "Yeah. I kind of figured something was off." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding again. "I paid him cash," Darren said. "But the title he gave me, it looked weird. I hired a lawyer to check it out. And guess what? It ain't clean. If what you're saying is true, kid, you still own that cabin." Relief and confusion crashed over me at once. If I still owned it, why was Darren calling me? Before I could ask, Darren continued. "Problem is, I already put money into it. I started fixing it up. I moved some stuff in. And I ain't walking away without something to show for it. My stomach dropped. So it wasn't over. Not even close. I thanked him for calling and promised to meet him at the cabin the next day. We needed to figure this out face to face. After hanging up, I slumped onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. This was a mess. A giant, stinking mess. But at least now I had a shot at getting my cabin back. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed the deed, and started the long drive up to the mountains. The road twisted and turned through thick forests, the early morning mist wrapping the trees like ghostly fingers. As I pulled up the long gravel driveway to the cabin, my heart twisted. It looked different. There were new shutters on the windows, a fresh coat of paint on the porch. It wasn't my cozy old cabin anymore. It was changing, being molded into something else. Standing on the porch was a large man with a thick beard and weathered skin. Darren. He crossed his arms as I got out of my truck. You Logan, he called out. Yeah, I said, walking toward him. We stood facing each other, two strangers with one very big problem between us. I don't want trouble, Darren said gruffly. But I ain't letting you just take it without making this right. I get it, I said, holding up the deed. But legally, it's mine. You were scammed. And believe me, I'm furious about it too. We talked for hours, going over everything. Darren showed me the fake documents Rick had given him. It was bad. Rick had forged signatures, faked notary stamps, the whole deal. I already paid Rick 50 grand for this place, Darren said bitterly. I'm out everything. I felt bad for him. Really, I did. He was just another victim of Rick's lies. But I couldn't just walk away from my mom's cabin. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped low behind the trees, both lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Darren said, maybe we can figure something out. Hope flickered inside me. Maybe there was a way to fix this without lawyers and fights. Maybe we could both walk away with some dignity. But just as I was about to respond, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. I turned to see a black SUV pulling up the driveway, and stepping out of the driver's seat was Rick, smirking like the devil himself. Rick stepped out of the SUV, slamming the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shake. He wore sunglasses even though the sun was dipping behind the trees, and he had that same cocky grin I'd seen 1,000 times before when he thought he'd gotten away with something. What are you two lovebirds talking about? He called out, his voice dripping with mockery. Darren stood up slowly, his arms crossed tight over his chest. I stayed seated, trying to keep my heart from pounding out of my ribs. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, I said coldly. Rick shrugged like it was no big deal. Just coming to check on my investment. Your investment? Darren growled. You sold me a cabin you didn't even own. Rick chuckled, like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. Relax, big guy. A deal's a deal. You paid, you got the place. Logan here doesn't even know how to take care of it. I did you both a favor. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Rick wasn't just a liar, he was proud of it. We're not just gonna sit back and let you steal from both of us, I said through gritted teeth. Rick took a step closer, his face darkening. And what exactly are you gonna do about it, kid? You think some piece of paper's gonna save you? He jabbed a finger toward my chest, and Darren immediately stepped between us, his big frame blocking Rick from getting any closer. You need to leave, Darren said quietly, but there was a deadly edge in his voice. Rick laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Yeah, sure. You two have your little talk. But don't think this is over. He turned back to his SUV, but not before flashing me a wink that made my stomach turn. We watched as the SUV disappeared down the driveway, the sound of tires kicking up gravel long after he was gone. Darren turned to me. That guy's a real piece of work. Yeah, I said, feeling exhausted and sick all at once. And he's not gonna give up easy. We sat back down on the porch. The sun had set, and the night air grew cold around us. An owl hooted somewhere deep in the woods. It should have felt peaceful, but instead, there was a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. "What now?" Darren asked. I looked at the cabin, at the home that had meant everything to my mom, to me. I couldn't let Rick win. Not this time. "I think it's time to call a lawyer," I said, my voice steady. Darren nodded. "I know a guy. He's good. Used to be a prosecutor." We made a plan. The next morning, we would drive into town, meet with Darren's lawyer, and figure out how to untangle the mess Rick had made. As I lay in bed that night, an old creaky bed that still smelled like pine and smoke from the fireplace, I thought about my mom. About how proud she was when she bought this place. About the weekends we spent fishing, hiking, sitting by the fire. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land. I was fighting for her memory. Sleep came slowly and fitfully. Every creak of the cabin made me jump. I kept seeing Rick's smug face in my dreams, hearing his mocking laugh. Morning finally came, bright and cold. I rolled out of bed, threw on a hoodie, and went outside. Darren was already up, pacing on the porch, coffee cup in hand. "You ready?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. We climbed into Darren's pickup truck and headed down the mountain road into town. The lawyer's office was in a brick building near the courthouse. Inside, it smelled like old books and wood polish. A tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes greeted us. "You must be Logan," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I'm Mr. Barnes. Let's sit down and get started." I told him everything, about my mom, the cabin, Rick, the fake sale. Darren filled in the rest. Barnes listened carefully, taking notes. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, son, you have a strong case. Very strong. But it's not going to be easy. Rick sounds like the kind of man who'll do anything to stay out of trouble." "What can we do?" I asked. Barnes smiled slightly. "We can hit him where it hurts." He laid out a plan. We'd file for a court injunction to stop Rick from interfering with the cabin. We'd press charges for fraud. And if Rick didn't cooperate, well, Barnes had some friends in law enforcement who would be very interested in hearing about a forged deed and stolen property. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. But just as we were wrapping up, Darren's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face went pale. He showed me the screen. It was a message. From Rick. "Nice little chat you're having. Hope you said your goodbyes to the cabin. Things are about to get real messy." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting into knots. "What does he mean by that?" Darren asked. Barnes frowned deeply. "It means you boys better get back up that mountain. Fast." Without another word, we bolted out of the office, jumped into Darren's truck, and peeled out of town. I didn't know what Rick had planned. But it wasn't good. And I knew, deep down, this was about to get much worse. Darren drove like a man possessed, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel as the truck bounced and jolted up the winding mountain road. My heart hammered against my ribs, each second dragging like an hour. "What do you think he did?" I asked, my voice shaking. Darren didn't answer. He just pressed harder on the gas. When we finally rounded the last bend and the cabin came into view, I felt my stomach drop to my shoes. Smoke. Thin gray smoke curling lazily into the sky from behind the cabin. "No, no, no," I muttered, throwing open the truck door before it even fully stopped. I sprinted toward the cabin, my boots slipping on loose gravel. The cabin itself was still standing, thank God, but when I rounded the corner, I saw it. Rick had set fire to the woodshed. The small wooden structure where we kept tools, firewood, and old fishing gear was fully engulfed in flames. The fire crackled and popped, throwing sparks into the dry grass nearby. Darren was right behind me, shouting, "Get the hose. Now!"